Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Public Accounts Committee to order and welcome everyone in attendance. I trust everyone had an extremely uneventful long weekend full of no news whatsoever. My name is Shannon Phillips. I'm the MLA for Lethbridge West and the chair of this committee. As I begin this morning, I'll invite those participating in the committee room to introduce themselves, starting with Deputy Chair.
Good morning, Roger Reid, MLA for Livingston McLeod and Deputy Chair of Committees.
Garth Rosal, MLA, Vermilion, Lloydminster, Wainwright.
Good morning, Mark Smith, Drayton Valley, Devon.
Good morning, Jordan Walker, MLA, Sherwood Park.
Good morning, everyone. Peter Singh, MLA, Calgary East.
Good morning, everyone. Jackie Lovely, Camrose constituency.
Good morning, everyone. Jackie Armstrong, Hominick, MLA, Fort Saskatchewan, Vegreville.
And Senior Financial Officer.
Kate White, Deputy Minister, Jobs, Economy and Innovation.
Scott Beebe, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister, Agency Governance and Program Delivery.
Jennifer Jabs, Assistant Deputy Minister, Stakeholder Relations.
Morning, Rob Dreesen, Assistant Auditor General.
Morning, Doug Wiley, Auditor General.
Good morning, Darren Billis, MLA for Edmonton, Beverly, Clareview.
Marie Renault, St. Albert.
Good morning, Raki Pancholi, Edmonton, Whitemud.
Good morning, Nancy Robert, Clerk of Journals and Committees.
Good morning, everyone. Aaron Roth, Committee Clerk.
Okay, and it appears that we don't have anyone joining us by video conference this morning. Very good. And we do have two substitutions this morning, Mr. Smith for Mr. Churton and Honourable Mr. Billis for Honourable Mr. Schmidt. So a few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business. Microphones are operated by Hansard staff. Committee's proceedings are live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. Those participating by video conference are encouraged to turn on your camera while speaking and mute your microphone when not speaking, although I don't think we have any of those today. And please set your cell phones and other devices to silent. Just moving on to the agenda now, are there any changes or additions to the agenda this morning? Seeing none, I'll ask that a member move that the agenda for the May 24th, 2022 meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts be approved as distributed. Moved by Mr. Singh. Thank you. Is there any discussion on this motion? All in favour?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. That motion is carried. We'll move to the approval of the minutes. We have the minutes from the May 10th meeting of this committee. Do members have any errors or omissions to note at this time? Seeing none, I'll ask that a member move that the minutes of the May 10th, 2022 meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts be approved as distributed. Moved by Mr. Roswell. Thank you. Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll ask all in favour. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion is carried. So we'll now move to the Ministry of Jobs, Economy and Innovation, who are here to address their annual report from 2020-21. Deputy, you may provide opening remarks not exceeding 10 minutes, and your time starts when you start speaking.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. Good morning. I'm pleased to be here to represent Alberta's Ministry of Jobs, Economy and Innovation. As you heard, I'm joined by Scott Beebe, Acting ADM, Agency Governance and Program Delivery Division, Jennifer Jabs, ADM Stakeholder Relations Division, Paula Bain, ADM Economic Policy and Strategy Division, Sonia Johnson, SFO, Jobs, Economy and Innovation, Labour and Immigration and Indigenous Relations, David Goldstein, CEO, Travel Alberta, Rick Christians, CEO, Invest Alberta Corporation, Laura Kilcrease, CEO, Alberta Innovates, and Christina Williams, CEO, Alberta Enterprise Corporation. I'll provide an overview of the ministry and its achievements for the fiscal year 21. Following my overview, we'll be happy to answer any questions the committee has. It's hard to describe in fiscal year 2021 the efforts of the ministry staff to maintain and support Albertans and Alberta businesses and job creators throughout the pandemic. Everything wasn't perfect through the year and we learned a lot of lessons, but I do want to take a moment to thank the teams across the department and the government for how hard they worked. The ministry saw several key changes during fiscal year 21. In August 2020, the ministry was renamed from Economic Development, Trade and Tourism to Jobs, Economy and Innovation, which coincided with a shift in the ministry's mandate to oversee the implementation of Alberta's recovery plan, develop sector strategies, and manage the province's growth agenda. In February 2021, the department implemented a new organizational structure with 4 divisions to better align with the ministry's work. The divisions were, as you heard, Economic Policy and Strategy, Stakeholder Relations, Agency Governance and Program Delivery, and Financial Services. The department was also supported by centralized corporate services for communications and human resources, and by the work of Alberta's 6 ministry agencies: Alberta Innovates, Alberta Enterprise Corporation, Alberta Research and Innovation Advisory Committee, Northern Alberta Development Council, Invest Alberta Corporation, and Travel Alberta. In 2020-21, the consolidated ministry expense budget was $306 million compared to actual expenses of just over $1 billion. This total was $724 million higher than budget, primarily due to the COVID-19 pandemic and economic slowdown. In 2021, the Government of Alberta made a rapid shift in focus from promoting economic growth to protecting the lives and livelihoods of Albertans and supporting economic recovery. In addition to overseeing Alberta's recovery plan, JEI's core activities aligned with 4 main outcomes identified in the ministry's 2023 business plan: supporting Alberta entrepreneurs, businesses, and communities to drive growth and job creation, attracting, retaining, and expanding investment in Alberta and growing trade, optimizing Alberta's innovation system to support economic growth, and supporting a strong tourism industry that creates jobs and economic growth in Alberta. Under Alberta's recovery plan, the ministry worked to support Alberta entrepreneurs, businesses, and communities to adapt, recover, and keep Albertans working. $626.4 million was expensed through the Small and Medium Enterprise Relaunch Grant, supporting more than 40,000 businesses and organizations that collectively employ over 300,000 people. Through Alberta Biz Connects, ministry staff provided guidance, resources, and more than 14,500 customized responses to businesses and community groups seeking direction on how to navigate public health restrictions and reopen and operate safely. We implemented the Commercial Tenancy Support and Protection Act and regulation to protect commercial renters from March 17, 2020 until August 31, 2020. We worked with the federal government and other provinces to make the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program available in Alberta. Other milestones included launching the Technology Innovation and Emissions Reduction Economic Recovery Program through Alberta Innovates, partnering with BusinessLink on the new $10 million Alberta Digital Economy Program, continuing to grow Alberta's film and television industry by enhancing the Film and Television Tax Credit Program. In fact, through the Film and Television Tax Credit, we approved 31 applications representing an estimated $122 million in production spend in Alberta. We also made significant progress in removing regulatory red tape that creates barriers to success for job creators, both big and small. The ministry achieved a 27.2% red tape reduction on March 31, 2021, exceeding the government's 12% target. To help boost trade and investment, JEI took steps to implement the Investment and Growth Strategy, a government-wide approach to increasing private sector investment in both Alberta's primary and high-growth sectors. This included standing up the Invest Alberta Corporation. The Investment and Growth Fund was also announced, providing the Invest Alberta Corporation with a valuable tool to attract high-impact, job-creating investments to Alberta. 2020 was also a record-setting year for venture capital in Alberta's technology sector. Alberta companies attracted $455 million in venture capital investment spread across 51 deals, a 100% increase over 2019. The ministry took action to build on this momentum. We continued the Green STEM pilot program, a pan-Alberta pilot for company creation and high-tech entrepreneurial development, and the Alberta Enterprise Corporation was recapitalized in June 2020 with $175 million over 3 years to attract more venture capital to Alberta. And while investment attraction was a major focus for much of 2021, on the trade front, ministry staff continued to advocate for Alberta's best interests on the international stage, including in trade negotiations and disputes to ensure Alberta's fair access to markets and opportunities abroad. During the year, JEI continued to seek opportunities to optimize Alberta's innovation system to support new and better jobs for Albertans. In April 2020, the Innovation Capital Working Group submitted its final report with 14 key recommendations on how to attract new investment in Alberta's early-stage tech companies. The ministry took all of these recommendations into account as it began work on the Alberta Technology and Innovation Strategy. Although the final strategy was still under development at the end of 2021, the ministry implemented a series of initiatives in that fiscal year in direct response to some of the Innovation Capital Working Group's recommendations. As mentioned, the immediate actions included the recapitalization of the Alberta Enterprise Corporation, which I touched on earlier, and supporting the launch of the Innovation Employment Grant to grow the technology and innovation ecosystem. To develop research, innovation, and commercialization, advance talent, grow sectors, and attract investment, the ministry also provided $232.8 million in support through Alberta Innovates and through grants to innovation organizations and post-secondary institutions to build a bright future for all Albertans. In fiscal year 21, the ministry also awarded $6.7 million in funding through the Research Capacity Program's Small Equipment Grants stream to enhance the province's research infrastructure. This funding supported 31 talented researchers at Alberta's post-secondary institutions and leveraged $12.8 million in additional project funding from the Canada Foundation for Innovation, institutions, industry, and nonprofits. Together, this funding is supporting world-class researchers, entrepreneurs, and the development of emerging technologies in Alberta. As part of its mandate, the ministry delivers strategic programs and services to grow tourism spending in Alberta. While we remain committed to growing the tourism industry in the province, the impact of COVID-19 on the tourism sector required us to focus our efforts on providing immediate relief while laying the groundwork for the industry's recovery. JEI worked to provide supports to the tourism industry throughout the year, including abatements of the tourism levy, $8 million in support to 5 destination management organizations, and expanding Travel Alberta's mandate. Travel Alberta also refocused its efforts to roll out several domestic awareness campaigns to support government's public health messaging, spearhead initiatives to connect with and support tourism businesses impacted by COVID-19, and help distribute more than $18 million in assistance to industry partners through a series of relief programs. This is just a small sample of the ministry's accomplishments during fiscal year 21. Again, I would like to thank Alberta's Public Service for the commitment to supporting Albertans and Alberta businesses through the COVID-19 crisis. I would now be happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now invite the Office of the Auditor General to provide some opening comments for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning again, everyone. As of today, I should point that out, as of today, we have 5 outstanding recommendations within the Ministry of Jobs, Economy, and Innovation. In November 2021, we issued 3 recommendations, 1 to Invest Alberta Corp. And 2 to Alberta Enterprise Corp. And Alberta Innovates. We recommended that Invest Alberta Corporation improve its financial reporting processes. We issued 1 recommendation to each of the Alberta Enterprise Corp. And Alberta Innovates. Relating to Alberta Enterprise Corporation, we recommended that it improve its performance reporting processes used to measure, monitor, and report value generation, specifically by these 3 items: setting targets for the measures identified in its business plan, monitoring and analyzing results compared to targets, and comparative results and costs, and 3rd, reporting internally and externally their analysis of the value it generated, cost effectively, including lessons learned. With respect to Alberta Innovates, we recommended that it improve its performance reporting processes by establishing targets for corporate program and project performance measures, analyzing its corporate program and project results to targets and to costs to achieve those results, and reporting both internally and externally the value generation results from all research and innovation activities, including the contribution to government desired outcomes. In December of 2019, we issued 2 recommendations to Travel Alberta to improve their processes to manage the risks of cloud computing. We'll be reporting in the very near future on our assessment of the new processes now implemented by Travel Alberta on those recommendations. Respecting the financial statement audits, we have 4 separate audit opinions on the financial statements that are included in the Ministry Annual Report. Those relate to Invest Alberta, Alberta Enterprise Corp., Alberta Innovates, and Travel Alberta. And in all cases, we issued a clean audit opinion on their financial statements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we're in an in-session 2-hour meeting, so that means we begin our first rotation with the official opposition with 12 minutes. I have the Honourable Mr. Billis.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you everyone for joining us. This first block will be questions toward Invest Alberta. On page 23 of the annual report, notes, quote, the newly established Invest Alberta Corporation will also deliver concierge services to its investment clients under guidance of its board and CEO. End quote. I have a number of questions on the expenditure of funds from Invest Alberta and decision-making. Now, unfortunately, because of government decision-making, Invest Alberta cannot be FOIPed for the fiscal year in question. I have some serious concerns from a large number of people about impropriety at the organization, and that concierge services is really a euphemism for sticking it to the taxpayer. The Guild restaurant is a very fancy restaurant in Calgary. I understand at times Invest Alberta might have to entertain clients, but I understand that staff like to entertain themselves on the taxpayer dime. No clients, just staff expensing fancy lunches and booze. My first question, how much has been spent at the Guild?
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to address this group about the initial activities of Invest Alberta over the first 9 months of operation.
Just introduce yourself for the record, please.
I am Rick Christians. I'm the CEO of Invest Alberta. My apologies. As far as hosting expenses and expenses that were associated with concierge services in the first 9 months of the year, they were a total of $4,800. And so the amount of alcohol I do not have in front of me, but I will take that under advisement and get that back to you. But that was the total expenditure for the first 9 months of the year that we're reviewing this morning.
Great. Thank you very much. You probably don't want to go very far. On the amount expended in 2020-2021, how much was spent on food and alcohol for ministers and or food or alcohol on political staff? And by that, I mean the folks employed in ministers' offices and the Premier's office.
Thank you for that question. I would reiterate the answer that I gave you a minute ago, in that the total expenses on hosting, including any events, was $4,800 for the first year. And although I did not live in Alberta at that time, it's my understanding that there were very few meetings and events or anything happening due to the restrictions that were due to COVID. So again, I will get you a detailed breakdown on some of those answers, but the total amount is $4,800.
Wonderful. Yeah, if you could break down how much was spent at the Guild, and then if you have detailed expenses for ministers specifically and political staff outside of staff at Invest Alberta in writing, that would be wonderful. I'd like to ask about value for money. As was reported in the media, Invest Alberta spent a lot to entertain at the Fairmont in Lake Louise. Truffle oil prime rib, that type of thing. A VIP booze tent also. The executive director of Democracy Watch called it, quote, a layer of cake of conflict of interest, end quote. A few questions on this taxpayer funded endeavor. Which cabinet ministers, MLAs, and political staff were in attendance? What was discussed? What was the cost? And how many other events like this were held?
I'm, again, answering questions on the first 9 months of stand-up of the organization, and the event reference actually happened in the last year. So we will come back next year and discuss that. In general, Invest Alberta spends an enormous amount of energy and time to meet with investors across the world when allowed and when possible for the restrictions that have been in place. And our intent is to be smart with tax dollars and make sure that we provide a return on investment to the taxpayers of Alberta. And so when it comes to hosting people, we are very careful in how we spend the money. We make sure that we derive maximum value, and that by the time we are meeting people, that they are serious prospects who are looking forward to investing jobs for Albertans, which will help our economy diversify. And at the end of the day, that is what we're here for to do at Invest Alberta. It's to take a new commercial approach to the attraction of business, and we will share with you next year the additional successes we've had as a result of that particular event.
Thank you. Let me quote from the Auditor General in his November 2021 report on Invest Alberta. The corporation's draft financial statements required material adjustments to the recognition, presentation, and disclosure of its revenue and expenses, end quote. Not a good start. First of all, did Invest Alberta at all times comply with the Treasury Board directive on hospitality expenses? And if so, can you table the work of the senior financial officer that proves this occurred? Here, we can go back and forth. I don't need to read all three. Please.
Absolutely. So Invest Alberta observes and adheres to all regulations that are set up by the Alberta government in its various policies and recommendations. And the Auditor General did review all of our expenses and provided us with a clean audit. So we fully intend and do adhere to all regulatory requirements as outlined by the financial acts, the various financial acts.
We've heard much about inappropriate behavior at Invest Alberta, and we're just scratching the surface. Did the minister ever order an investigation into the allegations of inappropriate behavior and poor expenditure controls?
I'm not aware of such a request being made by the minister.
Did the Board of Directors ever expense alcohol for a board meeting or a board dinner?
They did not. The Board of Directors, over the first 9 months of the year, only met in person once, and for all other meetings had to go remote, like most organizations did. And so the board actually met for the first time in person last week as a full board.
Okay. I've heard that Invest Alberta tried to buy 500 bottles of Alberta whiskey, but that it was shot down by the ministry. To the Deputy Minister or any officials, what can you tell the committee about this, and did this raise culture problems for you or the minister?
Thank you very much for the question. So certainly when the organization was new, there were folks that were doing their best to ensure they were getting a good deal on hosting expenses, which did cause an inquiry and a question and some guidance from the ministry. And there was no alcohol expensed. Ultimately. As Rick mentioned, Invest Alberta does have expense policies which closely adhere to and are consistent with the directives provided by Government of Alberta.
Thank you. Let's move on to contracts. Invest Alberta spent $750,000 to sponsor Alpine Canada. Your annual report says, page 23, states that Invest Alberta is a tool to target new high-impact investments that create well-paying jobs. How does a $750,000 investment in Alpine Canada create that new diversified economy in Alberta?
Thank you for the question. I did just check with staff, and there are no receipts for the guild in the period mentioned, so there are no expenses at that particular restaurant. As for our investment in promotion and gathering new leads and new opportunities for investors to come to Alberta. The event or the sponsorship reference actually happened last year, so I will address any questions related to that next year. However, I should point out that the research that we've done clearly demonstrates that Alberta is known for some of its traditional industries, such as agriculture, such as oil and gas, and such as some more of the traditional minerals and extraction that we are well known for around the world. But when we surveyed decision makers and investors around the world, there is a very low awareness of the amazing ecosystem that has been created in this province over the last number of years, for example, in technology. So most technology investors from around the world, when they consider Canada, they primarily look at Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, maybe Kitchener-Waterloo and Ottawa. But Alberta is usually not part of their decision set. So part of the planning and thinking that is going on at Invest Alberta is to determine how we access that community more effectively so that we become part of the decision-making set.
Right, sorry. Thank you for that answer, although that doesn't answer why $750,000 was spent on Alpine Canada. But the chair of the board of Invest Alberta has personal and familial connections to Alpine Canada, and a $750,000 sponsorship represents nearly 25% of Invest Alberta's expenses for the fiscal year. Something doesn't add up. Did the chair disclose a conflict of interest as this deal was coming together, and what steps did Invest Alberta take as an organization to ensure that familial personal interests weren't being advanced, with taxpayer money?
Thank you for that question. The Invest Alberta Board has developed strong policy and measures to make sure that when conflicts of interest do occur, that number one, they are announced, that they are declared. And so at the beginning of every board meeting, we make sure that we go over those declarations to determine if there are any issues, and they are minuted. And our minutes are public, and they're on our website, so you can see that that happens at every board meeting. As for our chair and the Alpine Canada discussions, he excused himself from all discussions. He was not part of the decision-making process, and all proper processes and procedures were followed.
Thank you. My next question is to the Auditor General. Did Invest Alberta ever contact your office to get guidance, advice on proper board governance or preventing conflict of interest issues?
Thank you for the question, Chair. I'm not aware, but nothing came to my attention personally, but I'm going to ask Rob Dreesen.
No, there was no direct questions.
Okay. Thank you. Let me ask about other contracts that folks have brought to my attention. At some point, Invest Alberta hired Justin Archer on the taxpayer dime with no process. He was hired with no competition by David Knight-Legg, the Premier's former top advisor. And then Justin Archer's firm, Berlin Communications, we understand, was given a sole source contract by Invest Alberta. Now, this looks like cronyism, but let's clear the air. What was the annualized value of Justin Archer's contract with all benefits? How much was given in the sole source contract to Berlin Communications? And if we are mistaken, has that deal been reviewed by the Audit Committee and or the Auditor General? And did the Minister or the Premier or his office have any communications with respect to these sourced contracts?
Thank you for the question. That hiring was done in the current fiscal year, so I will defer that question until next year. As for contracts, all contracts that the Invest Alberta Corporation enters into follow normal government procedures and processes, and the Auditor General has checked on that. So we make sure that we do a competitive process where appropriate, and we move forward in ways that are in compliance.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure we'll get to it. That time has elapsed for that block of questioning. We'll now move to the government side for 12 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming today, and we're looking forward to a good conversation here. Page 13 of the annual report focuses on outcome 1, supporting Alberta's entrepreneurs, businesses, and communities to drive growth and job creation. But as a result of the pandemic, there was a kind of a shift from promoting economic growth to maintaining what we had and saving lives and livelihoods of Albertans and supporting the economic recovery. So it was quite a switch. This ministry's mandate has been led to the execution of the Alberta Economic Recovery Plan as part of that shift and pandemic support. So just wondering what the Alberta Recoverable Plan has done to address job creation and or job losses and help improve the economy overall.
Thank you very much for the question. So the Alberta government has invested in a wide array of programs to get Albertans back to work and with good paying jobs of the future, while developing a system to nurture talent and create opportunities for industry. One core focus within the recovery plan was strengthening our workforce. So some results under the strengthening our workforce pillar include getting thousands of Albertans back to work with a $370 million investment through Alberta Jobs Now, by helping businesses offset the cost of hiring and training unemployed or underemployed Albertans in new or vacant positions, with anticipated support for hiring more than 21,000 Albertans, including 770 persons with disabilities in the coming months in both urban and rural communities. So attracting the best and brightest job-creating entrepreneurs and skilled graduates to Alberta through the International Graduate Entrepreneur Immigration Stream, Foreign Graduate Startup Visa Stream, and the Accelerated Tech Pathway. $15 million over 3 years through a partnership with MyTax to support more than 3,800 internship opportunities to help promising students gain world-class research skills from industry professionals. Over $20 million to increase direct support for apprentices and invest in the organizations that promote apprenticeship and help these students gain critical on-the-job experience. We also focused through the recovery plan, the government focused on building infrastructure, infrastructure that's needed now and infrastructure that's needed to build the economy of tomorrow. So investing over $20.7 billion in infrastructure projects over 3 years supported more than 50,000 direct and 40,000 indirect jobs through 2025. Broadband, increasing connectivity was again another key infrastructure platform, and also increased funding for municipalities through the Strategic Transportation Infrastructure Program, added another $50 million to support 70 priority infrastructure projects. I mentioned earlier the $175 million recapitalization of Alberta Enterprise Corporation. Removing the $10 million per project cap on film and television actually made a big difference in terms of the size of productions coming through, and providing funding to post-secondary institutions to execute leading-edge research in quantum computing and artificial intelligence. Excuse me. Recovery wasn't just about the economy, though. If we'll recall, there was a really big focus on childcare. $130 million was invested so that working parents could have access to safe, high-quality childcare through the pandemic. We also made a really clear commitment to diversifying our economy and growing our natural resource base through things that came in later years of the recovery plan. The Clean Hydrogen Center of Excellence, expanding and modernizing irrigation infrastructure was something that got started right away. And continuing Alberta-made industry-funded technology innovation and emissions reduction that, again, Alberta Innovates helped execute. So those are just some of the achievements through the Alberta Recovery Plan that was really the refocused attention of the ministry in 2021.
Yeah, so there's a lot of sectors there. So there was, I know in my area, it's agriculture and oil and gas is the dominant ones. And the biggest problem we had through that time is not enough staff. So something must have happened. How did you decide what sectors to support through that process? Or how you allocated the money?
So the investment and growth strategy actually kind of identified the sectors that were really Alberta's strengths. So energy and clean tech, everything related to energy is certainly, I think, indisputably a strength of Alberta. Agriculture, as you mentioned, agriculture, tech, and everything around agriculture, certainly a primary strength of Alberta, always has been. Tourism, again, we were focused on the 10-year tourism strategy. We also identified through the investment and growth strategy 3 enabling sectors that would hit any sector in the future. One was technology and innovation, and the technology and innovation strategy was released just this last year. One was transportation, aviation, and logistics, and we took several actions, including the Strategic Aviation Advisory Council in that vein. And finally, finance and fintech. So if you think about needing money in the movement of goods and technology to advance every sector, those were the enabling sectors that could really support any sector for the future of the economy. Again, building on the strength of our primary sectors and what we were already really good at.
Okay, well, great. Thank you very much. Page 13 elaborates on the ministry's focus on red tape reduction through digital transformation and improved service delivery, removing policy and administrative barriers to growth. So for 2020-2021, the government's target, and you've mentioned this in your introductory talk, was 12% reduction, and you said that you exceeded that. So I guess, can the department show how red tape reduction had directly impacted Albertans, making it easier to engage with the government? And maybe you can elaborate on how much red tape reduction you were able to accomplish.
Thank you so much for the question. So as I mentioned, collectively JEI, which includes our agencies that are sitting behind supporting here, this is when we get to take credit for all their great work too, did exceed our target by achieving 27%. And we are positioned to meet or exceed overall our 1/3 target through the remaining years. We reduce red tape in JEI in programs, policies and forms, and through digital transformation and improved service delivery. We don't regulate a lot in JEI, which will help support businesses, foster economic recovery, and create an attractive investment climate. So one thing that we were able to do to make sure we kept our red tape count low through the pandemic was the way that we had simplified processes that accelerated support on the SMERG, the Small and Medium Size or Medium Enterprise Relaunch Grant. So it was our latest and best effort, which can always be improved, to simplify. It was a simplified online application where businesses entered their information once and were able to apply for the program ultimately multiple times. Alberta Biz Connect also provided one window experience for not-for-profits and the public to easily access information and updates on how to navigate public health restrictions and operate safely. And that doesn't feel like red tape, but being able to get to the answer quickly, we have to remove some red tape in order for that to happen. So as I mentioned, Alberta Innovates standardizes application forms across almost all of its programs to be more user-friendly by simplifying and eliminating non-essential questions, and then enabling a suite of applications across several programs with just the one entry point. And again, Alberta Innovates has also implemented a grant management system that just improves usability and transparency for clients. So in JEI, that's how we reduce red tape. We don't have a lot of regulation to alter.
Just thinking about that, sometimes when you deregulate, you lose oversight or control. Did you run into any of those problems, and how'd you handle that?
Well, so the key thing, especially in grant programs, is to make sure that you do have enough information and control. And what we found was that we've actually been quite successful through attestations. So, for example, I mentioned SMERG. We asked businesses to attest to their financial statements and then audited a sample after. So that was one of the controls we put on. We were prepared to ask for payments and audit a further sample if we found there was a high degree of inaccuracy, let's say, on the applications. And what we found is where there has been inaccuracy, businesses have been quite quick to get in touch with us and fix up any errors. And we haven't lost any measure of control, and we've seen no decline in our ability to recoup errant payments or any additional errant payments. So we've managed to keep enough control that we could remove some of this red tape without risk.
And did you have a goal as to how fast you wanted the money to get out, and was that achieved?
So initially with SMERG, and I'm going to ask Scott Beebe to back me up on this if I get anything wrong here, Scott. Initially with SMERG, our goal was to have the portal up in 5 weeks, and I think we got it out in about 5.5 weeks for the first time. The first application process actually ran quite smoothly for businesses. We did have some glitches by the time we got to the third application process. So one of the lessons we learned was around complexity. So once you're using that same system for the third time, it's not as quick as it once was. And it took us. We actually had to pause the program for a week by the third tranche and do some work on the system.
Yeah, okay, well, that's great. Yeah, well, thank you very much for your report, and keep up the good work. Thank you very much. I think we'll just wrap it up there.
Okay. Thank you. We'll now move to the second rotation, official opposition of 9 minutes.
Thank you very much. I want to follow up on a statement or a comment that Ms. White made. As far as the department being very careful on expenditures, providing an additional layer of oversight, and I appreciate that. So I just want to go back to, can you confirm that Invest Alberta did in fact try to purchase 500 bottles of Alberta whiskey?
I can't confirm that, actually. We did have I can't confirm that specific instance. MLA Billis, what I can confirm is that we had a question around the purchase of alcohol and the bulk purchase and advised against it.
Okay. And that was, do you remember the time frame of that?
It was in the first fiscal year in question.
Right. Okay. So I'd like to go back to Mr. Christiansi for questions. First, can you table, I appreciate you've talked about the first 9 months of expenses, but can you table well, table is probably the best way of framing it, all hospitality expenses for Invest Alberta. I'd also like to know, or for the committee to have, which were covered by the department, which were covered by the deputy's office, and which were covered from other expenses as far as hosting and hospitality. Then moving on to the sole source process, can you confirm that those were followed as set out by the GOA when we talk about sole source contracts, as my previous questions talked about?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we will table the items you've asked for. And as far as sole source and public RFP processes, I just got some additional information on the Berlin question you asked previously. Okay. That was a public RFP. It went through the regular GOA processes and was awarded through the regular RFP process. Okay. In all cases, Invest Alberta does follow the standards that the Alberta government sets out for how we procure services from people around the world. So we follow those standards not only here in Canada, but also when it comes to our international offices.
Okay. Beginning on page 112 of the annual report, we see some financial information about Invest Alberta. However, it's pretty short on details. So I'm looking to understand those numbers. Now, I understand Invest Alberta entered into an agreement with DLA Piper. I'm curious to know how much it was for, what it was for, and was that a sole source contract, or was it put out to tender?
Thank you for that question. I will table that question and get those answers to you.
Great, thank you. And I'm just going to, confirm that as a commitment within writing within 30 days to the committee, as is the practice of departments submitting it back to the Public Accounts Committee.
Absolutely.
Thank you. How much was the Rob Seidel from DLA Piper paid for his work? And to what extent does the ministry or Invest Alberta view someone in an outside contractor role being so tightly involved in the signing of MOUs on behalf of the government and taxpayers? And how is that viewed as appropriate?
So Invest Alberta uses outside legal entities to vet all of its MOUs and all of its agreements because they tend to be complex, sometimes involving public companies, sometimes involving companies overseas. And therefore it engages different lawyers at different times to make sure that the agreements being contemplated meet all of the requirements that the government of Alberta has. As well, a lot of these agreements are signed with public companies that have strict requirements around disclosure as far as they're concerned. So that we need to make sure that we meet all of their standards as we move forward. So there is a fair amount of access on MOUs to specific lawyers or legal firms because each one of the MOUs is unique and distinct in the way it's drawn up and the purposes it serves. And for those reasons, legal staff does get engaged.
Well, I appreciate having it go through a firm and have, legal eyes put on it. What I'm not understanding is that why was that entity or Rob signing the MOUs as opposed to someone directly hired in Invest Alberta, someone within the corporation?
Thank you for that question, and it's something we've been evaluating on an ongoing basis. At what time does it become better to bring it in-house, and we complete that analysis every year on the budgeting basis, and we've actually just completed it. And we, at this point, still find it's less expensive to outsource this particular item because of its complexity and because of the various requests that come in. We sign MOUs with companies in Japan. We signed one yesterday. And so the law there is very different from North American law. So to find someone with that skill set to bring internal into Invest Alberta could be very expensive. And I don't think we'd find someone that would have the experience to sign agreements in Japan, in the US, in Canada, in Europe. So for that reason, we are currently outsourcing that. However, we will continue to look at that particular situation. If it becomes more reasonable to place it in-house, then we will move that in-house for sure.
So you talked about conducting an analysis. Could you table that analysis to this committee as far as looking at those two different options?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Now, you know, David Knight-Legg was the CEO. He was one of the Premier's confidants. You also had a minister who David Knight-Legg and the board reported to. How involved and how much oversight was there of Invest Alberta by the minister?
The ministry conducts a fair amount of oversight. It has presence at all of our board meetings, and so is an observer at each and every board meeting and involved in those discussions. My predecessor and I meet with the Deputy Minister on a regular basis to discuss any pertinent items and et cetera. And then the chair of the board, the Deputy Minister, and my predecessor, and the chair of the board also meet with the minister at least monthly to review and discuss items. And then as items come up that need immediate attention, we connect regularly when that is required.
Okay. Now, you just mentioned that the ministry is in attendance at board meetings, but in your annual report, it shows that Ray Gilmore was the observer, not the ministry.
I'm sorry, I'm new to Alberta. I'll say government in general attends to board meetings, and I know that Ray does disclose information to the ministry.
Yeah, and I'd love to know how many board meetings does the actual department have? Has the department attended in this fiscal year?
So in the fiscal year we're talking about, I did actually attend every board meeting. I believe Ray and I were together for 2 of them. I can tell you that for the inaugural board meeting, which was in person in Calgary in July, Minister Furr was in attendance. So again, in this fiscal year, the corporation was stood up, and then the minister changed in September. I think for the current fiscal year that we're in, I have not been in attendance at these board meetings, but Ray Gilmore has. In terms of oversight, in terms of your question, MLA Billis, we rely on the typical oversight between Crown and agency, which is through the board chair, the board chair to the minister. We do certainly meet on a regular basis and field questions. We mentioned one of them earlier from the corporation, and make every effort actually to work with Invest Alberta should a potential investor, for example, need access to the Alberta Jobs Now program. That's administered through Labor and Immigration. So there's also a regular channel of, I guess, collaboration between the department and the corporation when it comes to particular investment files. In terms of oversight, Auditor General and ministerial oversight, along with Ethics Commissioner and the Public Interest Commissioner.
All right, second rotation, government side, 9 minutes, please. Go ahead.
And thank you so much for the work that your team is doing to improve our economy by bringing all sorts of jobs to Alberta. Thank you so much. It has a definite impact on the lives of Albertans and making life better for everyone. My question here is, I see that the ministry initiated the new Alberta Digital Economy Program through Business Link with $10 million in funding. Page 15 explains that Business Link encouraged and helped small businesses accelerate their transformation to the digital economy. Can you further elaborate on this program and how it is that Business Link helps entrepreneurs and small businesses transition to an increasingly digital economy?
Thank you very much for the question. So JEI has provided BusinessLink, excuse me, with a $10 million grant, an additional $10 million grant from the 2021 budget for a 2-year program with a project completion date of March 31st, 2023. But we do also fund BusinessLink on a regular basis. For this project, BusinessLink is working with Digital Main Street, which is a nationally recognized platform to stand up for the Alberta Digital Economy Program by building on the previous success of Digital Main Street partnerships with municipalities like Edmonton, Calgary, and Medicine Hat. DMS is a not-for-profit organization that operates an online platform and services to help businesses with the adoption of digital tools and technologies. DMS has experience delivering the desired results in Alberta and is nationally recognized for its work. So Alberta is already home to one of Western Canada's largest digital service squads, which operated in Edmonton through a partnership between the City of Edmonton, the University of Alberta, and Digital Main Street. So the newly launched Digital Economy Program will add to these efforts, providing more resources for the model and building on the existing successes. So the Digital Economy Program has been designed to meet the needs of small businesses as they transition to serving clients online. And you can imagine through the pandemic, so many more businesses thought of providing services online than ever contemplated it before. So the teams support job creators with a range of tactics, from development of e-commerce stores to support with the implementation of digital productive tools within their businesses. BusinessLink coordinates the work of 19 nonprofits, municipalities, and post-secondary institutions that run local teams in their communities. So you get to talk to somebody local. BusinessLink ensures the quality of provision is maintained throughout the province and manages the administrative elements of the program. The initiative is province-wide and focused on helping Alberta's small businesses go digital, enhance their online presence to increase visibility and reach more customers. Businesses are aware that they need to embrace online opportunities, again, never more aware than after COVID-19, but too often are either ill-informed or sometimes just lack the confidence to forge ahead into the digital world. So the DEP meets entrepreneurs where they are, and provides hyper-local support from a knowledgeable team that is not pushing a single product or selling a service. So that's what the entrepreneurs have on their side. Nobody's trying to make money off of getting them online. I mean, many more people will later, but initially with this program, we're expecting, hopefully, to assist more than 5,000 small businesses, that's our target, and provide valuable youth employment opportunities to students and recent graduates in high-demand fields. And we've already actually hired over 100 young people who are out there helping businesses on the Digital Economy Program.
Thank you for the answer. You know, it's been very interesting to see the transition. There's been a number of companies in my community who went through that transition and have enjoyed a lot of success. So I just wanted to thank you for enhancing that. So how did JEI's grant to BusinessLink support small businesses with the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, as I mentioned, thank you again for the question. As I mentioned, the Digital Economy Program actually built on the regular operational funding that JEI provides BusinessLink, and it's a wonderful tool. So BusinessLink had a total outreach of 10,109 people in over 28 Alberta communities through 351 events and outreach activities in the fiscal year we're talking about. 73% of the events were open and attended by participants from all around the province. During 2021, BusinessLink participated in 12 events with Alberta women entrepreneurs, reaching more than 750 female business owners across the province. So with the pandemic affecting small business, BusinessLink provided support to those affected businesses. They received over 1,726 one-on-one inquiries related to COVID-19 supports and services. So basically what they could do was take you through the labyrinth of supports that were available depending on your business type. And then the resources for small businesses affected by COVID-19 on their website received 16,000 page views and 14,000 unique page views through this fiscal year we're talking about. And several new online programs were launched to support businesses called Peerpreneur, which you can imagine is getting help from other entrepreneurs, an online toolkit, small business directory, and the Resilient Recovery Program, in addition to the big digital economy program that Business Link helped us with.
That's fantastic. I want to expand on the digital transformation and initiatives that this ministry undertook during 2020-2021. As we all know, digital connectivity showed to be more important than ever during the pandemic. And I see on page 13 that BizConnect provided more than 14,500 customized email responses to inquiries on public health direction as it pertains to business and community groups and the public. Can the department further elaborate on how the Alberta BizConnect contribute to jobs, economy, and innovations COVID-19 response to support Alberta businesses?
Thank you for the question. I can tell you that a tremendous amount of effort was expended by not only JEI ministry staff, but we borrowed resources from across government to support Alberta BizConnect through COVID-19. So the goal of BizConnect was to provide a one-window experience for Alberta businesses, not-for-profits, and the public to easily access information and updates on how to navigate public health restrictions and guidelines. BizConnect delivered outstanding service to Albertans with a team of experts who responded to Albertans' questions. In cases where JEI wasn't able to address the inquiry in-house, the inquiry was directed to the ministry responsible, usually Alberta Health. Like 99.9% of the time, the question obviously was for Alberta Health. And the correspondent was advised that their inquiry was referred to the appropriate ministry. So sometimes there was some really complex questions came up through BizConnect that took a little bit longer. So direct responses to Albertans' inquiries were uploaded to the Alberta BizConnect webpage, an online resource that provides information on public health restrictions as well as guidelines for businesses. In addition to providing information to Alberta businesses, the BizConnect team also became a valuable source of expertise and advice to partner ministries across government. So you can imagine as these questions were coming in, the team would notice where there was inconsistencies. So we're able to bring that back to Alberta Health. So again, the 14,500 customized responses sometimes did take a little bit longer when they were referred on to other departments, but for the most part, our staff were able to turn around this information quite quickly. Because if you'll recall, it was a real time of uncertainty. We knew things had changed when we had gotten inquiry and a request for operating guidance from the outdoor gun ranges, not the folks you always hear from looking for public health restriction information.
All right, very good. We'll now move on to our third rotation for the official opposition, 9 minutes.
Great, thank you, Chair. I want to understand the staffing model of Invest Alberta. Much of the criticism is that we had officials in the Ministry of Jobs, Economy and Innovation. They moved to Invest Alberta with huge salary increases, no expense controls, no FOIP. And then some talented folks who made it over there on merit were let go for folks with less experience. This is all about how our tax dollars were expended. So a few questions on this. First, I understand that Jason Denny was paid a contract worth more than the Deputy Minister here. Was paid a contract, to work 3 days a week. Please explain that to me. What was he paid? Why pay him more than the Deputy Minister for less work for an organization that was spun off from the department?
Thank you for the question. Sorry, I missed the name that you used, so I wonder if you
Jason Denny.
That name doesn't ring a bell with me at all, so I'll have to take that under advisement and come back to you on that. In general, when it comes to recruiting and hiring people, we created a plan, a strategic plan based on the initial act that was created, and that set out a number of strategic direction and priorities for our organization to execute on in partnership with the ministry. So salaries were determined by a survey which looked at both experience and qualifications. And specifically to the CEO's contract, we made sure that it complied with the Reform of Agencies, Boards, and Commissions Compensation Act. So given people's qualifications and also where they came from, we offered competitive salaries that were so in cases of where people transfer from the ministries, the salaries were maintained at the same level they were at for the ministry before.
Interrupt. Can you please table that? Because again, my information is quite contrary to what you're saying, and so I would like to see the evidence between what they were compensated. The staff that came over from JEI, what they were pay scale was, obviously with personal information wiped, and what they were paid through Invest Alberta. I appreciate what you're saying, but their experience did not change, so their compensation jumped significantly from working within the department to working for Invest Alberta. I appreciate the fact that the private sector has a different compensation, is compensated differently than within the department. Yet, again, significant jumps in a number of different salaries, including those. Well, that's a flag for taxpayers. So if you can please table that. That would be wonderful. We have FTE counts in the budget on Schedule 21 of the fiscal plan every year, but this high-level information tells us very little, and so I want to know more. How many employees left the ministry to work for Invest Alberta? What percentage of the workforce does that make up within Invest Alberta? And most importantly, what was the percentage increase in their compensation overall when they moved over? And so if you can, again, table that information within 30 days, that would be wonderful. Now, I just want to give the Deputy Minister a chance to respond. When I asked specifically about Jason Denny, does the Deputy know this name?
My apologies, MLA Billis. I do not know the name, and I'm not familiar with the contract.
Okay. All right. I mean, when you table the compensation of employees, then we'll see if compensation does actually, in fact, exceed the Deputy Minister for a position that works far fewer hours. So again, just to top that off, what we're looking for here is how much, again, with no personal information shared, obviously it'll be redacted, but what was the change in total compensation for every employee that left JEI and moved to Invest Alberta? One of the criticisms that we've heard of Invest Alberta is that they've hired good people and then fired them, resulting in big compensation and then hiring less competent insiders. So let me ask, as a sign of managerial competence, what is the employee turnover? And how does that relate to benchmarks in other comparable organizations?
So thank you for the question. I think there's two items that I would like to raise here. First, during the first 9 months of the operation of the organization, there was in fact very little turnover. If you look at our teams both here and internationally, the people that were hired to a large degree were the people that were with the organization for the remainder of the first fiscal year. And that's a tremendous accomplishment, especially when you consider some of the lockdown situations that our teams faced around the world. I know we've had our issues here in Alberta, but in general, if you go to China or other places, the lockdowns were much more severe, much more significant, and it would have been appropriate for people to quit and come back to Canada to live in easier circumstances. That did not happen. As for turnover in a startup organization, I think it's important to recognize that at the end of the day, the skill set required to stand up a team, to open offices, to recruit staff, and to move an organization from non-existing to inexistence is quite different from the skill set required once the operation is up and running. So startup organizations are different in that regard, in that they often do see significant turnover in the first number of years because different skill sets are required once the organization is operational. So turnover at that particular point is not unusual. The other thing to keep in mind is that the people who did the incredible work to stand up this organization in the middle of a COVID pandemic, it's never easy to start an organization. It's never easy to start an organization with government. It's not easy to do that in the middle of a COVID pandemic. Those people acquired an amazing skill set and the capability to move forward. And so they have become very attractive targets for other companies to recruit because the organization has been quite successful in what it's been able to achieve in the first 9 months of operation. So for that reason, it's not unusual to see turnover in a startup organization, and we've seen some of that.
Well, fair point, but we also know that high turnover can often be a result of a poor culture. It could be the result of poor management. And so what we're trying to get to the bottom of is why so many employees have turned over. I appreciate in the first 9 months maybe there was a lower turnover, but I think what we'll see when you table the documents is that a number of people have either left willingly or have left Invest Alberta, which again can point to a number of underlying issues that we're trying to get to the bottom of. We know how important Invest Alberta is for the province, and yet the organization still does not have an office in Calgary. Now, I understand there was a deal in place to rectify this problem, but the office space was, I believe, owned by a member of the board, which is a clear conflict of interest. Curious to know what happened.
Thank you for the question. That information is in fact incorrect. When we started looking for space in Calgary, which we did towards the end of the pandemic, because there was really no reason to open up an office while no one could go to the office. We started looking at spaces, and all spaces that are owned by the company that is controlled by our CEO were automatically excluded from the search. So we actually took incredible protection to make sure that we were not in any way creating a conflict of interest. As well, the chair excused himself from all discussions and did not vote on the final office space, which is actually a sublease from a Norwegian oil company and is not in any way related to the properties that the CEO or the chair is responsible for.
Okay, thank you. We know that Calgary is the nerve center of Alberta's economy, and so what's questionable here is how is Invest Alberta fulfilling its mandate if it can't even open an office in Calgary? That again, the important work that it's being done. And so again, at the moment, Invest Alberta still does not have a physical office space in Calgary. Is that correct?
That's incorrect. The office space opens next week, so it's there.
Okay. All right. Good. Well, congratulations. That's 3 years in. We see a real lack of transparency at Invest Alberta. So board meeting minutes used to be posted, but that got locked down.
All right. Very good. We're on to third rotation government side, please.
Good morning. And again, I want to thank you, Deputy Minister, and your team for joining us this morning. Still thrilled at the opportunity to get together in person at Public Accounts and actually see the ministry in person firsthand and have a chance to dialogue. So thank you to all of you for taking the time to come in and be with us this morning. My first question is related to the film and television tax credit. Livingston McLeod is of course, a location of choice for film and TV industry. Going back to, I remember back in '77, Richard Donner's Superman movies were filmed around the area, and it was thrilling to know that was happening. And I actually stole a little bit of time this weekend and watched Ghostbusters Afterlife again, and enjoyed the Alberta vistas. So I'm really thrilled with the implementation of the film and TV tax credit, because we've seen a tremendous benefit in my riding. And probably one of the greatest things is I've seen Albertans return back to Alberta to be able to work. So we've reunited families and allowed them to work in their province. So related to the film and tax credit, Objective 1.3 was to grow Alberta's film and television industry and to help Alberta compete for major media projects. The film and television tax credit program was launched on January 29th, 2020. Offering a refundable Alberta tax credit of 22 or 30% on eligible Alberta labour and production costs. I see in Budget 2021, it included changes to the programs. Can you please tell us how the FTTC program improved in 2021, and why such changes were necessary? And just as a follow-up, what impact has the FTTC had on our Alberta economy?
Thank you so much for the question, MLA Reid. I'm going to ask Scott Beebe, who's our acting ADM of Agency Governance and Program Delivery, who may be actually more excited to be here in person than you are this morning. Go ahead, Scott.
Thank you, Deputy, and thank you for your question. And I think you're correct. I probably share your excitement to the same degree. With respect to the film and television tax credit, what we recognized was that industry had feedback for the program on how enhancements could be incorporated, and the program further improved. Now, what we saw was that demand for production content was growing, and growing quite significantly, not only here but across the globe. And from their feedback, we recognized that removing the per production cap would bring the program in line with production incentive programs from comparative jurisdictions like Ontario and British Columbia that do not cap their per production funding. Now, the per production cap was lifted in fiscal 21, and this change would come to benefit future productions that would apply to the program. And 4 productions have since benefited from the removal of this cap. Now, these 4 large productions are expected to inject more than $360 million into the province and create nearly 6,000 direct and indirect jobs. And this includes the production The Last of Us, the single largest television series production in Canadian history. And the attraction of this production is a major milestone for the Alberta film and television industry, and just shows the world Alberta's stunning landscapes, our immense talent, and our first-rate studios. We've seen through the program a steady increase in the volume of production applications. And as these numbers are expected to continue to grow, they will further diversify the economy and create new jobs. We've also seen several high-profile production companies and streaming services. They're not only filming here in the province, but returning for additional seasons and for new productions, highlighting Alberta's competitiveness and as a destination of choice for the film and television industry. Some of the repeat clients that we've seen include Netflix, Super Channel, CTV, and Creative Productions Incorporated. Your second question asked about the impacts that we are seeing through the program. In fiscal 21, we saw 31 productions apply to the program, and they've been authorized for $30 million in tax credits. These productions are expected to spend approximately $120 million in the province and result in 3,300 direct and indirect jobs. Through the program design, organizations are incentivized to hire local talent because only Alberta-based salaries, wages, or contracts are eligible for the credit. Thank you.
Appreciate that. I will note that I saw several postings on social media this weekend at Cannes Film Festival, and our film and television tax credit has been front and center in a lot of those, so it's certainly getting the attention of the world. So thank you for that. I want to change gears a little bit to talking about pandemic response and protecting lives and livelihoods of Albertans and small businesses during these challenging times. I'd like you to reference with me page 14, where it mentions the implementation of the Commercial Tenancy Support and Protection Act and Commercial Tenancies Protection Regulation. Could you please tell me how Jobs, Economy and Innovation supported commercial tenants in meeting their rent obligations during the pandemic?
Thank you again for the question. So JEI contributed $67.2 million as Alberta's share of the federal government's Canadian Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program, or CECRA. I can tell you that there was a lot of back and forth at the time. We were trying to figure out if we had to design a program ourselves or we could piggyback on what the federal government was doing. But eventually, the federal government came out with the CECRA program, which provided urgent rent relief to commercial property owners and tenants to mitigate the economic impacts of COVID-19 on Alberta businesses, and it ran from June to October 2020. Through the program, 19,045 small commercial tenants and 8,635 commercial property owners were assisted in this province in Alberta. So JEI also implemented the Commercial Tenancies Protection Act and Regulation to help address gaps in the federal government's rent assistance program and the delay I just mentioned. So the legislation protected a wider range of tenants than were eligible for the CECRA, including tenants whose landlords decided not to apply for the CECRA program. If you'll all recall, like both sides needed to want to do that program, the landlord and the tenant. So JEI also supported commercial tenants through other recovery programs, including the small and medium enterprise relaunch grant and tourism recovery supports. But the SECRA program and the Commercial Tenancies Protection Act were the big two around tenancy support.
Thank you. And maybe just as a follow-up, can you indicate to us how many businesses benefited from the program?
Oh yeah, my apologies. Since you could benefit from both sides, 19,000 tenants, just over 19,000 tenants, and just over 8,600 landlords benefited from the program. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And with that, I will cede my time to MLA Walker.
Thank you so much, Deputy Chair, and as well, Chair, through the Chair always, and great to see the JEI staff. You guys are doing amazing work. It's great to see you guys again. As I said before, my background and my passion is in international relations. I always enjoy also hearing from all members on JEI, people who care and are passionate. Probably in the next round, once we get back to the government side, I would say through you, Chair, to the Deputy Minister and their staff, I'll be focused on that great sounding acronym SMERG, the Small and Medium Enterprise Relaunch Grant that was so critically important to Alberta small businesses. So just an FYI on that, and I'll turn it back to you, Chair, as it looks like we've run out the clock on the government side. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll move to the official opposition for the fourth rotation, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just to go back to the department, the person who we're talking about was a senior advisor to Invest Alberta. His name is Jason Denny, D-E-H-N-I. Unless my sources are incorrect, that again, he was compensated greater than the current deputy minister for working 3 days a week. So if you can get back to the committee on that in writing, that'd be greatly appreciated. As I was mentioning, the board meeting minutes used to be posted, but then have gotten locked down. So I'm wondering, and I know that the CEO indicated that the board meeting minutes are posted online. We just checked and no, they're not. And so I'm curious to know why that changed. Why are the board meeting minutes no longer posted? Who made the decision, and was the Premier's office or the Minister's office involved in that decision?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for pointing that out. We just launched a brand new website which is focused on driving a higher level of engagement from our stakeholders. And as part of that, we need to repost the minutes, and I appreciate you pointing that out. We will do that, and we will make that happen. There was no involvement from the Ministry, Premier's office, or anyone else on that. It's purely a technical cutover that has caught us here.
Okay, appreciate that. And so we can expect that within the next 30 days as well to have the board, or can I request that the board meeting minutes also be tabled to the Public Accounts Committee, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. Now, I'm going to jump around a little bit in this last block. We know that David Knight-Legg was the CEO of Invest Alberta. I'm hoping that you can table his annualized total compensation when he was in that position, and then recognizing after leaving as CEO that Mr. Knight-Legg stayed on at Invest Alberta on contract. While he was on contract, if you can also table what his total annualized total compensation is as well.
I believe that I will be able to table the compensation for the CEO during the time he was CEO, during the 9 months that we're in discussion here. The contract applies to another year, so it won't be relevant at this point.
Looks like next year we're going to have a Groundhog Day PAC meeting. So talking a little bit about the trade offices, they were completely gutted in the first year. So a number of questions. How many offices were closed? How many staff lost their jobs? And quite frankly, what I'm hearing from stakeholders at every turn is how the government of Alberta, through JEI and our trade offices, have completely dropped the ball and are not supporting Alberta companies to enter new markets. That Invest Alberta is solely focused on investment attraction, and that our government or the GOA is missing out on the second side of that coin which of course is supporting local businesses to new markets so that they can grow and create jobs here in Alberta.
Okay, I'll take the first part of that question if I could, MLA Billis. So when the offices were transferred over to Invest Alberta, it is correct to say that several managing directors were recalled or their contracts were not renewed. So I believe this affected 5 to 6, but we'll confirm in writing. We did leave the locally engaged staff that were in the offices, working in the offices for the transfer over to Invest Alberta. So none of those folks lost their jobs. I don't believe initially any offices were closed, although with no managing director in the Singapore office, very quickly work ground to a halt. So I think it's fair to say that there wasn't certainly the same level of activity in markets where there weren't folks. I'll allow Rick to speak to when the new managing directors were hired. But in terms of your last question, maybe before I turn it over, I will say that most recently a decision has been taken by the government to bring the international offices back under the scope of JEI to take advantage not only of the trade opportunity that you point out, although Invest Alberta did continue to support trade activities through the time that they managed the international offices, but also with regards to advocacy, international labor attraction, international technology partnerships are now becoming a mandate. So with this expanded mandate for the international offices, in this current fiscal year, again, not the subject of this meeting, JEI will be repatriating the offices. Rick, did you want to add anything?
Just other questions. So first of all, just a comment. I appreciate the fact that the trade offices are going back to JEI. They never should have moved to Invest Alberta. That was a boondoggle. And so in this first year, I'd like to know as well, if you can table how many deals occurred in the fiscal year in question, how many companies were supported, how many companies accessed new markets through our trade offices. And again, I appreciate initially the managing director from the Singapore office was let go, and eventually that office closed. It's my knowledge that other offices have in fact closed, and so if Invest Alberta can table to the committee the number of staff at each of the remaining offices, those that were let go and what we have left. And with that, I'll turn it back to Rick.
Thank you for that question, and I've heard that misconception a few times. So no offices have closed and no staff have been let go. So today we maintain 2 people in Hong Kong. We have 4 staff members in Seoul. We have 4 staff members in Beijing, 1 in Shanghai, 1 in Guangzhou, and we had 3 staff members in the UK. And those were the exact staffing complements that we took over once the changes were made. There was also a managing director hired in China who sits outside of that office but works that. There's a managing director in London, and then the managing director for the rest of Asia worked out of Edmonton. So managing directors were put in place during the first 9 months, and then the offices continue to do the functions to the best of their abilities. We are very concerned.
If I can just interrupt, how many staff are in the Japan office currently?
4.
4.
Yeah.
The Guangzhou office, 1 staff, is a reduction from when we were government. I can tell you that personally because I was there multiple times. The number of staff in Beijing has also shrunk, as has Shanghai.
Okay, so those changes would have been made before IAC took them over. I'm talking about the time. Your question was around what happened while we were managing the offices. So those were the numbers at that time. I think the trade question is a fair one. During COVID, most trade gets done face-to-face, gets done by people coming overseas and finding clients, gets done by local Alberta businesses coming into town, doing trade shows, having meetings, and moving that forward. That ground to a complete halt because most companies were unable to travel anywhere in Asia. And so we are just coming out of the lockdown, as we are all aware. China is still not accessible. Hong Kong is still not accessible. Japan is just opening up. Taiwan is still not accessible. So if you looked at the areas of our responsibility, I think trade was more severely impacted, maybe even than investment, at the time of COVID, and that has been an issue.
So this next question is to the Deputy Minister. So do you agree that it was a mistake to move the trade offices over to Invest Alberta?
I think that the focus of investment, as I mentioned earlier, has changed. Trade, as you mentioned, simply wasn't the focus when the offices went to Invest Alberta. I can tell you that the international office focus has expanded again, with trade being a key pillar and beyond that. And if I could respond to your earlier question on trade activities, I can tell you that COVID was it was a tough year for trade. So we actually converted to doing.
Thank you. We'll now move to the government side.
Thank you, Chair, and again, thank you, officials, Deputy Minister, Auditor General, everyone for being here to talk about, focus on the annual report, by and large, for 2020-2021. I read it with great enthusiasm and interest, and fully informed, ready for my quiz, if you will. But again, Deputy Minister, through the Chair, I would say that I am going to focus my remarks, at least initially, on SMERG, the Small and Medium Enterprise Relaunch Grant that was so critical to providing supports to Albertans through the COVID pandemic, the first pandemic of that nature in over a century. And I can tell you, in my community of Strathcona County, where the business of my municipality is business, we're an entrepreneurial community, we have no business tax specifically, or no business license. We're very friendly with thousands of businesses, and as per my understanding of Statistics Canada, we have the highest family household income in Alberta, which we're very proud of, blessed with 3 refineries and sharing the industrial heartland with many great colleagues, including MLA Armstrong Homniuk, such a great champion for the industrial heartland and the energy sector. But Deputy Minister, through the Chair, I would say, beginning with SMERG, page 14 mentions that the Small and Medium Enterprise Relaunch Grant, which was implemented to provide support to small and medium-sized businesses, cooperatives, and nonprofit organizations that were ordered to temporarily close or curtail operations as a result of public health orders. Can you provide more details on this program, how successful it was, and how many businesses received funding from the SMERG? Thanks.
Thank you so much for the question. One of the things that we did in this fiscal year was manage to hire an amazing executive director who's acting ADM here today. So Scott will take the question on SMERG.
Thank you, Deputy, and thank you, committee member, for your question. And this is certainly a program I'm really proud to speak about. In fiscal 21, more than $626 million was expensed to provide support to over 40,000 organizations employing over 300,000 Albertans. Now, the program was created to respond to the needs of Alberta's job creators by initially providing up to $5,000 for each business. As the needs of stakeholders evolved with the pandemic, the program was broadened to provide more financial support and to allow more small businesses to apply. Eligibility was expanded to include new businesses that were incorporated after the program initially launched, and also included unregistered sole proprietors. Additionally, the income reduction threshold was lowered from 50% to 30% to support more businesses. Maximum payment was increased from $5,000 to $20,000 to provide more support to those that were affected by the pandemic. These funds provided support to businesses affected by the public health orders. And in fiscal 21, half of all businesses in Alberta were partially or entirely closed due to the pandemic. And while programs existed at the federal level, many of Alberta's businesses were not eligible. And SMERG, the grant program, filled that gap. When we look at the operations of the program, we recognize in fiscal 21, almost 100,000 applications were received to the program. And what we saw was that over 60,000 of these were processed within 14 days of their receipt to the program. And one of the aspects that Deputy touched on earlier was about the oversight for programming and the use of attestations. This is one program that used such an approach. And what we saw was that when an eligible business submitted complete information, the system that we put in place to process their applications was able to process them for payment within 2 days. Now, there were a number of applications that require greater support, and that support might involve program staff engaging with the business, clarify information that they had submitted, clarify their eligibility, and work with them to help them receive the payments that they would be eligible for.
Thank you very much for those answers. I would say, too, that I was hearing in my community just what a great support SMERG was. If I remember correctly, I think it was 3 rounds of SMERG, yes. And the small businesses make up the backbone of the Alberta economy. I know I don't have to tell people here that, but I think it's important to get on Hansard for eternity that I think 25% of GDP consists of small business. 1 million Albertans are employed in small business, and 95% of all businesses in Alberta are small businesses. So thank you guys so much for supporting them, and the immense processing time it must have took. Before I was an MLA, I was a civil servant with the GOA in labor and immigration, processing files, in this case for IQOS and AIMP, and I know how hard the staff worked to get those files done. So really appreciate that. So now let's turn to, as well, outcome 2 of the annual report, to attract, retain, and expand investment in Alberta and keep our trade growing. It's a big interest of mine, I know also for the member for Beverly Clairview and everyone here at this table today. Alberta's place in the world. We've had trade offices going back to 1971, which was first established in Japan, in Tokyo, under, I believe, Premier Strom of Social Credit. We're going back to some Alberta history here. So Alberta's destiny is obviously to be engaged deeply in the world for the benefit of Albertans. So as it is explained on page 22, the ministry works under a mandate to ensure that investment in the province and trade continues to grow the economy and create new jobs. I want to focus on the U.S. as a key partner of Alberta's economic growth and diversification. How did jobs, economy, and innovation engage with international stakeholders, particularly those in the U.S.?
Thank you so much for the question. So again, despite the challenges posed by the pandemic, excuse me, and the transferring of most of the international offices to Invest Alberta, JEI department has continued to lead and coordinate international advocacy and engagement, including advancing Alberta's interests with key stakeholders, negotiating and implementing memorandums of understanding, MOUs, engaging with U.S. transboundary organizations, as I think several folks in this room will have done, and collaborating with the federal government on international issues. So these engagement activities help build strong relationships with key stakeholders by promoting economic opportunities within the province, proactively identifying areas of collaboration, and identifying mutually beneficial solutions to key issues. Engaging with U.S. stakeholders is crucial to ensuring Alberta can export its products and service to markets in the U.S. While energy issues, particularly pipelines, continue to be our highest priority, particularly in fiscal year 2021, JEI also engaged and monitored other policy issues in agriculture, forestry, and public procurement that may affect the flow of goods from Alberta to the U.S. JEI also engaged in U.S. Buy American policies, country of origin labeling, and deforestation legislation that unfairly targeted Alberta's forestry producers. Mr. James Rajat became Alberta's senior representative to the U.S. in May 2020. Much of his efforts and engagement with U.S. stakeholders has focused on ensuring Alberta's products make their way into the U.S. And you know, when he sits down, and he has sat down with all manner, like every congressman and senator that he could, in the U.S. And the story that he tells is actually the story of environmental stewardship and social governance.
Alrighty then, we'll now move to our fifth rotation. The official opposition can read questions into the record for 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm going to speak quickly, so it'll all be on the record. Can the ministry table information related to any support given by Invest Alberta to each of the following projects, including any MOU that was signed? So the projects are Dow, Air Products, Mitsubishi, Northern Petrochemical, Infosys, Binance, AWS, or Fortune Minerals. Please table with the committee the application process for the Investment and Growth Fund at Invest Alberta, and how many applications were reviewed, what percentage of applications were successful, has the Auditor General reviewed this process, as well as how and where geographically have funds been expended. Please table with this committee the amount of licensed childcare programs that were eligible and received SMRG, including a breakdown by nonprofit and for-profit programs, including how much of the SMRG in total went to licensed childcare programs. When this committee last met with the Minister of Culture and Status of Women, they advised that they did not conduct a GBA Plus or Diversity and Inclusion assessment on the Economic Recovery Plan, that JEI was the lead. So please table with this committee the GBA Plus or Diversity and Inclusion assessment that was done on the Economic Recovery Plan released in the fiscal year in question. And specifically, if it was done, why did the Economic Recovery Plan include nothing with respect to targeted at women who actually experienced the greatest job loss during the pandemic? Similarly, can the ministry table with this committee any analysis or advice given by JEI to the Ministry of Children's Services on the decision to end the $25 per day childcare pilot program in the fiscal year in question? The ministry, JEI, would be well aware that that program was key to increasing job creation, economic growth, workforce participation, definitely things that JEI should be concerned about. So what support or advice did your ministry provide to Children's Services around the end of that $25 per day pilot program? Similarly, why was there no investment in the Economic Recovery Plan on childcare? The deputy mentioned $130 million that was invested in childcare. That was over $100 million of that was invested by the federal government. There was almost nothing invested by the provincial government into childcare at that time. So please provide an analysis of that. The Deputy Minister mentioned creating inclusive employment. Please table with this committee information about how many new positions were created with respect to inclusive employment, the list of employers that created these new positions, the total value, how it was funded, and the combination of provincial and federal funding. How will the success of that work be evaluated? And let me just see if I have time for anything else. I think that might be it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions for the record on the government side, if there are any? Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Outcome 3 of the annual report was to optimize Alberta Innovate's support to support economic growth. Page 4 explains that this ministry directed $232.8 million to Alberta Innovate's innovation organizations and post-secondary institutions to streamline research, innovation, and commercialization, and offer programming to develop and advance talent, growing sectors, leveraging funding, and attract investments. Page 10 explains that Alberta Innovates played an important role in the province's research and innovate system. Which results did Alberta Innovates achieve in 2021? And I'll cede the rest of my time to my colleague, Emily Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Major Innovation Fund, MIF, supports transformative research and innovation, excellence to advance Alberta's priorities. Key Objective 3.1 talks about ensuring that investment of public money have a clear return on investment. And how do we know the Major Innovation Fund, MIF, investments are the right ones for Alberta? And how has MIF enhanced Alberta's innovation competitiveness? And on page 33 of the annual report elaborates on the research capacity program and strategic research initiatives. These initiatives provide funding to post-secondary institutions, and I see that in 2020-2021 budget, both initiatives had $26.8 million, in addition to the leverage from the federal matching program from the Canada Foundation for Innovation. And can the department elaborate on the importance of both initiatives? And how does the research capacity program optimize post-secondary innovation? Thank you, Madam Chair. With that, I cede my time to Emily Thor.
Thank you, Chair. The pandemic caused a significant shift in Travel Alberta's destination promotion plans and activities. I see on page 39 that in 2020-2021, Travel Alberta was provided $39.7 million to support the government's public health messaging, and as public health restriction eased, to encourage Albertans to support local businesses and safely explore our great province. Can the department further elaborate on Travel Alberta's role, given that its mandate is expanding to become destination management organization? What results did Travel Alberta achieve in 2020-2021? Also, can the department elaborate on its economic diversification and job creation efforts? What are the other initiatives that Jobs, Economy and Innovation has undertaken to diversify Alberta's economy and support job creation? Thank you.
Alrighty, well, we are now moved on to other business. I'll just ask once again that the ministry follow up to the committee clerk within 30 days with the written responses. And are there any other business right now for honourable members? Seeing none. Date of our next meeting is Tuesday, May 31st with advanced education. Those at table, please be reminded to take your cups and so on with you. And I'll now call for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mr. Chur, thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, that motion is carried. Thank you very much.